Now we have left the low-lying, hot, humid coast, and we're travelling up in the mountains. The road, of course, as you may know, would hardly be called a road. It's cut out of the mountainside, and in places is very narrow, so narrow that two cars could not pass each other. And at times as this, one must be very careful indeed. Many accidents have occurred because of this fact. The road is very rough, lots of holes, and it is impossible to go at any speed. However, that's what keeps the accidents down. So we have to be thankful for something. On and on we go up this road. Round bends, some of them hairpin bends, where you must go as far as possible and then back up and then try and get around the next turn. However, that is easily accomplished when one becomes accustomed to it, but always being very careful and the alert. Of course, sometimes there are accidents, some of them small and some of them very, very dangerous indeed. Many of these cars or buses go over the side and down into the precipice below. Then, of course, many are killed, others are injured. But thank the Lord, we were saved from all that kind of accident during our time down in that part of the country. We passed through some small, very small villages, and they were very, very thinly populated up in the mountains. Not as many people as down on the coast, where there was lots of work to be found on the banana plantations. Here the people lived on a small little piece of ground that they had cut out for themselves. They grew corn, just enough to supply their own needs. They also grew black beans, and of course there was a little coffee in some of these places too, as well as other roots which they can grow down there. And we went right on and kept on until we passed through Towler Bay. Now Towler Bay is a little village, a little larger than the most. Here there's a cave. There was nothing known about that cave at that time, not until later years it was discovered. And it is not all discovered as yet. However, they're making efforts to discover it and get it into condition so that tourists will have the pleasure of seeing it. We go right on then, and of course the higher we go up, the cooler it gets. We're out of the hot country now, and we're up into the cooler climates of Honduras. Up and up we go, and very soon then we see Tegucigalpa appear. Now Tegucigalpa is quite a little city. It is situated halfway between San Pedro Sula and Tegucigalpa. And here there is a big district around it where small farmers make their living. They make their living, of course, by corn and black beans and some other things that they grow up there. Higher up they even grow potatoes, but they're very small. They're not very good either. So this Tegucigalpa was our journey's end for the day. We got there about 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and we went to the hotel. Now all passengers slept there at night, both coming from Tegucigalpa going to San Pedro Sula, and those coming from San Pedro Sula going to Tegucigalpa. That was the halfway point. There we had, an old-fashioned hotel with old-fashioned rooms. And although it was rather, well, you wouldn't call it very much at home, but it was, to me at least, a very welcome sight to see. The beds were not, of course, as we are used to, but however, we were able to sleep and have a good night's rest. The food, of course, is a little different from what we get on the coast. And we got all, of course, it's always rice and beans and a little, beef, a little meat, yeah, and some soup and such things as that, as well as the tortillas. And sometimes when I see a foreigner come in, they make every effort to find a little loaf of bread. And they have white butter, which is very good and takes the place of our butter. Now, we spent one day in that place looking around. I was very anxious, like as you might think, to see what was there. And Brother Hawkings, of course, knew the place well, as he had passed through there many times in his work as a culprit. And there was what was known as the Central American Mission. They were there. They had established themselves there for some time before. Up here, the further you go up is unlike the coast in this way. Right from San Pedro Sula to the coast of border of Nicaragua, there is no mission going on whatever. That we were right from the beginning on our own in that place. Up here it was a little different, and we soon got to know that they claimed that part of the country, and there was not very much encouragement for anyone else to settle in there. It was made very plain to us, although those we met were very, very kind and helpful in many other ways. They did not seem to have done much work there at that time. There seemed to be very few real believers. However, it was a start. And we spent one day there, as I have said, and then the next morning early, about 4 o'clock, we started off on our journey again, this time to go on to Tegucigalpa. Now the road was somewhat similar as we have already described, and we up one mountain and down another. There's a place by the name of Cocona, and that was a mountain that was rather high, and there was many turns in it. And as you went round that mountain to get up to its top to pass through to the other side, one met with other conveyances coming down, those that were on their way to San Pedro Sula. Going up one of these hills, my hat blew off, and of course they had to stop and went back and they got my hat, apologizing for running over it with a wheel and knocking it a little out of shape. However, that wasn't the worst. We went on a little further, and very soon they discovered that they were losing the mail. You see, this was the mail car too, carrying letters and small packages and all such things from one post office to the other. And something had happened with the back door of the baronessa, and the mail came out. So we had to stop there, go back, and try and pick up the mail. Some of it was over and down the precipice, and there was lots of fun gathering it together. Eventually, all was in order again. All was inside the baronessa, so we were ready to go.
At some of these hills, of course, the driver stopped and took on water. The radiator was boiling. You must remember way back in those years, they did not have the modern cars that there are today, and it was necessary to stop every once in a while and fill up with water, not only with gasoline, but with water too. In fact, the water seemed to be the principal thing going up those hills. And sometimes it was necessary to stop for quite a while until the engine cooled down before we could make any progress once more. On and on we went, and of course the further and higher we got, the nicer the climate was. It was quite nice as we went along. We soon were up in the pine trees, and the pine trees grew on higher ground, and so we could see nothing but pine trees then all over, whereas in the coast it would be bananas, 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 bananas wherever you went, but here it was pine trees, pine trees. However, it was nice and cool, and the riding, of course, was rough, but one got accustomed to that in time, and we really enjoyed ourselves. Then nearer and nearer we came until at last we were up as far as the height would go. And as we looked down in the valley below, there we could see Comnagua. Yes, there it was, another fair-sized place. This was, I might say, the capital of the country at one time, after they had been established in Trujillo, as we have described already. They went further inland, and I don't know how, I don't know why, but however, Comnagua was selected as the place to have the principal government established. So there they made their palaces. There they made their principal buildings. And it's quite a place of churches, Roman Catholic churches. And some of these churches are very costly. They would be today, but at the time they were built, labor was cheaper. And some of them have a kind of gold roofs which glitters in the sun. And there are many antiques in these places too. However, we were not so much interested in that. We stopped over there a night there. Now, Comnagua is a rather hot place to be up so high. Indeed, it isn't so high as we had to go down the mountainside to get to it, back down, not altogether to sea level, but almost. And there it was rather hot too, but not nearly so hot as down on the coast. So we spent all day there, going around, and there we were able to visit a mission that was there. But they made it clear and plain that they were in control in that place. And they had been doing a little work, but it was very, very little indeed, considering the number of people that were there. And like Tegucigalpa, they lived much in the same manner. They had agricultural ground around them, which was put to use and used to grow their corn and their beans. And then we left there again. We slept there at night. We didn't need to, as the baronessa would take you right on from Tegucigalpa to Tegucigalpa in the one day. But we wanted to see the place and the surrounding districts, so we spent the night there. And the next morning we were up early and on our way once more. This is the last stage of the trip up to Tegucigalpa. And as we went up, we met with the same conditions as we have already described. Up here, of course, the houses are different too than down on the coast. They're more substantial in many ways. They're built of adobe. It's colder up here, and they need better protection. So they built the houses with adobe, but very, very few windows. In fact, there may only be one very small window in a little house, two at the least. And the doors are all barred from the inside to try to make it safe from, whatever comes along. Now, as we went along, Mr. Hawkins entertained me by telling me of what had happened to him in many of these places in times gone by, as he had traveled that way by mule selling the Bibles, how he ran into a den of thieves, and how they had taken everything from him. However, he was not bodily damaged, and at other points they would steal his mule. Other points they left him with hardly anything, and many experiences that dear man had as he went about in years gone by selling the Bibles. Of course, at this time it was a little better. There was a road now. At that time there was no road, only a mule path, and that was the only way of transportation when he first went down into that land. Now, of course, they have a rough road cut out, as I have said, and vehicles can be used. And more all the time, the nearer we got to Tegucigalpa, the better the road was. And they seemed to be doing more repairing on it than they did down on the coast side. So on we went, and at last we looked down upon Tegucigalpa. We came to a big hill, and as we looked down from that hill, there we could see Tegucigalpa. Now, Tegucigalpa is really two cities in one. There is Tegucigalpa and Comayagua. Now, these are just, you might say, big villages, but they're separated by a river, the river Comayagua. And as we got nearer, we could see that we were traveling in the dry season, and everything was so dusty, dust everywhere. Whereas in the wet season, it would be mud everywhere. Sometimes, as we went along, we had to eat our own dust coming from the baronessa as we turned a sharp turn and went on up or it went down, as the case may be. So we found that as we passed through Comayagua, first of all, we saw there the river. That river, of course, is the laundromat for all of that part of the country. And it's some sight to see as one would walk down early in the morning and see the washwomen all busy washing their clothes and stretching them out on the stones, the dry stones of the river. All colors, all shapes, all kinds of wearing material, as well as bed linens, which indeed are not just exactly as we are used to. However, those dear people enjoy that kind of life seemingly. And in the houses there's no water. There's a central water tap outside in one of the squares, and they make their way there, and they take their own water containers and fill them up and carry them back to the house. These dear women folk do the most of that kind of work. They carry everything, of course, on their heads. And it's wonderful to see each one coming one after the other with a pail of water or a basin of water or whatever other kind of container they can find to fill with water and set that on their head and come walking along. Then in the homes, well, they're a little different than the coast too. As I have said, they're more substantial in many ways, although some of them are not very, very well built, and some of them are not very nice either. All have floors, I mean ordinary floors, earthen floors. There's no luxury in these homes. Only, of course, in a few houses of those who are richer. And there are quite a lot of rich people there. There are more now, of course, back in the year 1980, and than there were back in 1930. There were a few, the government men of there, of course, and the ambassadors from other countries. They were able, of course, to erect themselves in more permanent and more luxurious homes. But our work was more with the poor people. And we, of course, made our way to where they were. And we found them very hospitable indeed. However, in Tegucigalpa, as we went and visited all around, we found 3 or 4 missions there. And of course, they claimed all that part of the country. It seemed that they had divided the country up amongst themselves. That is, the highlands, the nice lands. The climate was good up there, and they all seemed to pick out those parts because of that. And they left the coast to us, and were given to understand that that was our territory. Well, the Lord, of course, had his hand in all that, and while we had our mission to go into all the world, as Don Alfredo would often say, we had our hands full down on the coast, and there was a big open door there and plenty to do. So we didn't take so very much interest in the up a higher ground, unless to look it over, see what it was for our own information for the future. And we spent some little time there. They had, we visited, of course, the Central Park. Now, each place has a Central Park down in Honduras, which in those days I think were used more than they are today. Now, Tegucigalpa had several of these parks, but the Central Park was, of course, the place where most people went and had a nice time in the afternoons or nights. And it was the custom there for young people to congregate in the parks. Now, in those days, well, things were not just so as they are today. All the houses had iron bars on them. The iron bars were put there to keep thieves out and to be a protection in the time of revolution. So any house that was of any value had its doors well barricaded, and the windows were also barricaded with these iron bars. Now the house, of course, is narrow in the front. At least there was a door, a big door called a salon, and that was the principal door to go into these houses. It didn't lead you right into the house, it led you into the patio behind or in the center. And there was, in any kind of a nice house, those nice, very beautiful flowers and plants there in that patio. And around the patio were built the rooms, the bedrooms, the living room. And away at the far end was the kitchen quarters. So one had to get used to all of this. Now, as you went along, you would see perhaps a nice young lady, and she wasn't outside. She was inside behind the bars, and there was a young man, and he wasn't inside. He was outside on the street, and he was making love to his young lady there, he on the street and she inside. Now that was the way that things were done at that time. Now in the evenings or at night, all those dear young people would come out. The young ladies would be escorted. They all would have someone with them. If it wasn't their mother, it would be their aunt, or it would be someone else that was in charge. So they walked round the park in one way, while the young men walked around in the opposite way, so that in this way they could see each other just as they passed. And one would look carefully, you could see the young lady pass a note over to the young man as he passed her. And sometimes you'd see a young man pass a note over to the young lady. And in that way they got to know each other. And of course then, when things got a little thicker and more, they knew each other better, then they had other privileges. Sometimes they were allowed to stop and talk to each other, but still under the control of some older person. And then when it went to the point of, well, forming their own home, the young man had to find someone to go and ask the hand of this young lady from the parents. Once I had to do this, and it was on the coast, and I had been visiting one of these little places for some time, taking the gospel there. And this young man got saved, and where I happened to be staying, there was two young ladies there. One of these young ladies had received Christ as her Savior. And this young man eventually came to me and asked me if I could not go and ask for the hand of this young lady, as he would like to marry her. This I did. However, the father was not, did not consent to such a thing. He knew this young man just too well. That was the trouble. And he said to me, no, today no, tomorrow no, and never. That's the reply that I got. And he said, that young man is no use. He goes about and he carries his possessions in a 5-cent bag, paper bag. And I know him well. He has been working for me, but he was very lazy. For instance, he would take the cattle out to put them in their grazing quarters, and my little boy would go along with him, but he would see a hole in the hedge that needed to be repaired, and he would tell my boy not to tell his father, because if he did, then he would send them out to repair it. No, he says, I wouldn't see my daughter to go in the hands of such a boy as that. So there you are. So I had the, well, if you call it a privilege, of going and telling this young man that there was no hope there, that he had better look elsewhere. So that was the way things were done at that time, of course. Well, as time went on, things changed until, well, today, I don't believe there's very much of that. I don't think so. They just somehow they follow the room or the custom now and just go and live together, and that's all. However, there was some of that going on at that time too, but not nearly to the extent as there is today. Well, we looked round Tegucigalpa, quite a place, and of course, as I said, it is divided by the river, and there's just one bridge over, and over the bridge then you come to the better part of the city. There's where the government have made their headquarters. There's where the president has his palace. And it is quite a building for the time in which it was built. Very substantial. It's built along the river's side with a big high wall, very thick. And in fact, there's a wall all around it, except when you come to the front gate of the palace is very ornate, very decorated, and I never had the pleasure of going inside, but one could see inside, and it would seem as is just built according as all other houses were built, with the big patio inside, full of nice flowers and plants and all colors of leaves. And they had different rooms there, and the president at times came out and addressed the people standing up above on the second floor. And they had the soldiers there, and the guards were on all times. They had the prison pretty near there too, and one could not pass by the prison gates. You had to take the other side of the street. Soldiers were always on duty there, and things were looked after in quite a wonderful way. They had streets very, very narrow all over the city, so narrow that they're having trouble in these days of cars, especially the big cars. Two couldn't pass each other, so they have quite a number of one-way streets there. That is today. Of course, in those days, there was no trouble with that. They were still using the ox carts and to carry goods about with, and mules. But today it's different. And today the town is getting more modernized. And old places have been torn down. And new buildings have been put up. In fact, it's quite modern today. You find all kinds of stores as you would here in the United States, and department stores that carry all kinds of goods. And there you can buy almost anything and everything if you have the money. That's the secret. And of course, those rich people have the money. The big coffee owners. You get up into the coffee country up there. And of course, there are coffee owners that live in Tegucigalpa. They have their coffee places there, and coffee mills, and it's quite a coffee place. And they have got money, and of course, then they are these merchants. Most of the merchants that I described before are the Arabs from Palestine that came out way back when there was trouble there. And they have established themselves very well in Honduras. And they are the ones that control the business as a rule. And it's the people of the country that control the government. They seem to be inclined to be more political whereas the others are more businesslike and more on for making money and enjoying themselves in that way. And if you're amongst them, it's all business, 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 talking business. And they've made quite a success of it. Well, Tegucigalpa has many other attractions, small parks and places, and there's a college there, very good college indeed, and get a good education there. And as time goes on, they're getting more and more education, and more university, more colleges, and there's other kinds of school, medical school, other things that help wonderfully the poor people as they get up, as they are now. Some of them are getting into better ways of life and making more money and able to do lots of things that was impossible to do before. So we had quite a time up in Tegucigalpa finding out many things. But one thing we wanted to find out was how to get to the Mosquito District. Well, that we found out they didn't go much from there to the Mosquito District. In fact, the Mosquito District was practically unknown. We were told we would have to take a baronessa to go for quite a little ways further, and then inland. And then after that, then we would have to make our own way by mule or whatever way we could get. We were told there that there was a coast. That's where you could get to the Mosquito District. So we were unsuccessful in that, although we learned a lot that those on the coast couldn't tell us. No one knows much down there, you see. The country isn't opened up yet. It isn't mapped properly. And even the authorities do not know so very much. That is, those who are in power, unless that's their particular branch of the work. Then they know, but maybe the next door neighbor to them do not know that they are in that branch of the work. So it's rather difficult, we found out, to find out much. So after spending some time there, then we thought we'd better make our way back home again to the coast. And that's what we did. We left there, went on to Sequatapeke again, and spent the night there. Then went on to thinking we'd get to San Pedro that day, but no, the bus, the baronessa didn't make Puerto Rios in time to make the train, the only train that went. So we had to spend a miserable afternoon there in Puerto Rios in a hotel that was not very, well, the smell of it in the first place wasn't very nice. And it was in a run-down condition. As for food, well, there was food all right, but well, I dare say you wouldn't enjoy it very well. But when one is hungry and can't find anything more, well, we spent the night there anyhow. Waited till the next day till the train came, and got on the train and got back again to San Pedro Sula once more. I didn't mention on our way from Sequatapeke to Tegucigalpa, we landed at a place in the morning pretty early, and it was time for breakfast. So we got off the baronessa, all of us of course, and we went into this restaurant to have breakfast. Now, who do you think should be serving us but the coming president's wife, Doña Elena? That's where General Carrillas lived, and he was going up for president at that time, and the elections were coming off pretty soon. So he lived there, and had quite a nice little place there. But his wife, which was not his wife at that time, but after he was elected to be president, well, he did a wonderful thing. He married that woman that he had been living with for so long and had a family with. But at that time, she was running a little restaurant, so Don Alfredo and I went in there and had our breakfast. Now, breakfast there, any other meal, is what they give you. There's no menu there. You don't choose what you want or tell them what you want. They give them what they have got, and that's the way it goes. We had, let me see now, yeah, we had a couple of fried eggs, and they were done very nicely. And we had some frijoles, that is black beans mashed up, and they were very good too. And then we had, of course, a few tortillas and some good strong black coffee. And after eating that, we were very well refreshed and ready for the road again. And when we came out, we saw the general himself. He was standing there, and he was talking to some Indians that had come a long way to see him. And he was talking to them about the elections. So after some little time standing around then, there we got on the bus once more, and off again to San Pedro's, up to Tegucigalpa, as we have already told you. We will have something more to say about General Correas in the future. In fact, we might have quite a lot to tell you about that wonderful man and how he governed the country, but we'll leave that for some time in the future. Now we're back again in San Pedro Sula, and we saw clearly if we would want to find out anything about the Mosquito District, we would have to go to Trujillo. And now Trujillo was the place that Columbus landed in, if you remember. A very old place indeed. So that's where we had to go to find out anything about the Mosquito District. So after some little time in San Pedro Sula, my wife and I started out on that ship. We left our little girl in the hands of Doña Evelina, Mrs. Hawkings. Off we started on that trip. Now that was indeed rather interesting. First of all, we took the train, and the train took us back again halfway to Puerto Cortes. And we had to leave the train there and get into a little boat, a very small boat it was, and cross the river, or rather go up the river and cross over a canal and go into another river. And they, of course, were pulling us up, and there was quite a few passengers on with their baggage and everything else. After some considerable time, we made to the other river and went up that river quite a distance until we came to another place where we got off. That was the place that we could transfer onto another train, another banana train, of course. So after waiting and waiting and waiting, eventually the train came along. So we put our baggage on and got on ourselves and went on our way, and passed through many banana plantations. Now, these banana plantations were built by the company. The houses are made of wood, and they're sitting on 6 feet stilts in the air. And the idea is when the rainy season comes on and the floods come down, the floods may cover 3 or 4 feet of the ground underneath, but the water won't rise up high enough to disturb the people, the banana people who live in these houses. They are called barracones, and each barracon is made up of 5 or 6 or 7 or 10 houses. That is rooms, rather. A room in the front and a room at the back. And then outside down below is where they have the kitchen. It is sitting on the ground down below. And there's always a space between the house and the floor, bottom down below. As I have said, 6 feet up in the air. Now these places were found very useful in the years to come. They could have good gospel meetings there. You didn't need to put up a tent, you didn't need to rent a place, you didn't need to build a place. Those places were already there. And the people lived up above, and the vacant place was down below. So we had the privilege of using those when the time came around to have gospel meetings in. There'll be more of this, of course, in the future.